and screaming, saying, "Your son broke another record." Coach Raymond Blackwell's voice came through my phone so loud I had to pull it away from my ear. "Mrs. Garrett, this is getting ridiculous. Your son just shattered the 100-meter record by 2 full seconds. 2 seconds. That doesn't happen naturally in high school track. I've been coaching for 19 years, and I've never seen improvement like this. He's either getting illegal training or he's on something." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, pulling into my driveway. "Excuse me? Are you accusing my son of cheating?" Blackwell didn't hesitate. "I'm saying no 15-year-old goes from decent to dominant in 6 weeks without chemical assistance. The other coaches are talking. Parents are asking questions. I need to protect the integrity of my program. I'm benching him until we get some answers." My heart pounded. "What kind of answers?" He exhaled sharply. "Drug test. Full panel. And I want to know what training facility he's using because this feels like college-level enhancement." I felt my face flush hot. "My son trains at the public track every morning at 5:30. He runs hills on weekends, he eats clean, and sleeps 8 hours a night. That's his secret." Blackwell laughed, bitter and short. "Right. And I'm supposed to believe a black kid from your neighborhood suddenly becomes the fastest runner in the county because he wakes up early? Mrs. Garrett, be realistic. I've seen this pattern before. Kids get desperate for scholarships. Someone tells them about supplements, and suddenly they're breaking records. It always comes out eventually. I'm trying to help your son by catching this now before it destroys his future." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You're benching him because he's black." Silence stretched for 3 seconds. "I'm benching him because he's suspicious. The timing is too convenient. The improvement is too dramatic. And frankly, yes, kids from certain backgrounds are statistically more likely to take shortcuts when they see an opportunity. I didn't make those statistics, Mrs. Garrett. I'm just responding to reality." I wanted to scream but forced my voice steady. "My son will take your drug test. And when it comes back clean, you're going to apologize." Blackwell's voice hardened. "If it comes back clean, I'll look at other explanations. But until then, he's off the team for Saturday's Invitational. I'm not risking our school's reputation on someone who might be juicing." I sat in my car after he hung up, shaking with rage and disbelief. My son Elijah had worked brutally hard for 6 months to transform himself from a middle-of-the-pack runner into something exceptional. He'd cut sugar completely, started strength training, studied biomechanics videos, and dedicated himself with a focus I'd rarely seen in a teenager. And now his coach was punishing him for success, wrapping racism in concern about program integrity. I walked into the house and found Elijah in the kitchen making his post-practice protein shake, still in his running gear, face flushed from training. He looked up and smiled. "Hey, Mom. Good day?" I set my keys down carefully. "Coach Blackwell just called. He's benching you for Saturday's meet." Elijah's smile vanished. "What? Why?" I chose my words carefully. "He says your improvement is too dramatic. He wants you to take a drug test." Elijah stared at me, confusion shifting to understanding, then to hurt. "He thinks I'm on steroids? Are you serious?" His voice cracked. "I've been killing myself every single day. I did everything right. I trained harder than everyone. And he thinks I'm cheating?" I moved to hug him, but he stepped back, his expression hardening. "Let me guess. He said something about kids from my background taking shortcuts, right? Or maybe he mentioned scholarships and desperation?" The accuracy of his prediction broke my heart. "Something like that." Elijah slammed his hand on the counter. "This is exactly what Coach Stevens warned me about when I switched schools. He said some coaches wouldn't believe a black kid could be naturally fast, that they'd find reasons to question everything." He grabbed his phone. "Fine. I'll take his stupid test today. Tomorrow. Right now if he wants. And when it comes back clean, I want him to say it in front of the whole team." I nodded. "I'll set it up. But Elijah, you need to know this might not end with the test. Some people don't want to be proven wrong." He looked at me with eyes too old for 15. "You think he'll find another excuse?" I didn't answer because we both knew the truth. Men like Blackwell didn't apologize when their prejudices got exposed. They just found new ways to justify their suspicions. The drug test happened the next morning at a clinic Blackwell specified. I drove Elijah there at 7, both of us silent. The technician was professional and thorough, taking blood and urine samples, explaining the panel would test for anabolic steroids, stimulants, hormones, and masking agents. "Results take 3 to 5 business days," she said, labeling the vials. "The report goes directly to whoever requested the test." Elijah signed the paperwork with sharp, angry movements. On the drive home, he finally spoke. "I'm going to destroy everyone at the next meet I'm allowed to run. I'm going to run so fast they can't ignore me or explain it away." I believed him. Elijah had inherited his father's competitive fire and my stubborn refusal to accept injustice quietly. At school that day, word spread about the benching. Several teammates texted Elijah asking what happened. He told them the truth. Coach thought he was doping, demanded a test, benched him until results came back. By afternoon, the track team group chat was exploding with reactions. Some teammates defended him. Others stayed silent. A few suggested that maybe the coach had valid concerns given how fast Elijah had improved. That evening, another parent from the track team called me. Her name was Diane Foster, and her son Connor ran the 400 meters. "I heard what happened with Elijah," she said carefully. I wanted you to know that Coach Blackwell pulled Connor aside today and told him to watch out for teammates who might be using unfair advantages. He specifically mentioned that sometimes kids will pressure others to use supplements or PEDs to keep up. My stomach twisted. He's poisoning the team against Elijah before the test results even come back. Diane hesitated. There's more. Connor said Coach Blackwell told the team that if anyone knows about substance use and doesn't report it, they're complicit and could face discipline. He's creating an environment where kids feel like they have to suspect each other. I thanked her for telling me and hung up, furious. Blackwell wasn't just benching my son. He was systematically destroying Elijah's reputation and relationships with his teammates, ensuring that even when the test came back clean, doubt would linger. I spent that night researching Coach Blackwell's history. His LinkedIn showed 19 years coaching at 3 different high schools. I found old newspaper articles about his teams, interviews where he discussed his coaching philosophy, photos of him with winning relay teams. Then I found something interesting. A local news story from 7 years ago about a complaint filed against him by parents at his previous school. The article was brief, mentioning allegations of discriminatory treatment that were investigated and dismissed due to insufficient evidence. I searched for more details but found nothing. The complaint had been buried, resolved quietly through whatever internal process the district used. I wondered how many other complaints had been filed and dismissed over 19 years. How many other talented black athletes had been accused of cheating or benched for being too good? I called the school from the article and asked to speak with the athletic director, claiming I was considering the district for my family. The AD was helpful until I mentioned Blackwell's name. Then his tone shifted. Coach Blackwell is no longer with this district. I can't discuss personnel matters. I pushed carefully. I just want to know about his coaching record. The AD paused. He left for another opportunity. That's all I can tell you. The drug test results came back 4 days later. Clean. Completely, unambiguously clean. No steroids, no stimulants, no hormones, no masking agents. Nothing but normal adolescent biology and hard work. I called Blackwell immediately. The results are in. My son is clean. Blackwell sounded almost disappointed. I'll review the report when I receive my copy. Assuming everything is in order, Elijah can return to practice tomorrow. No apology. No acknowledgement that he'd falsely accused a teenager of cheating and damaged his reputation. Just a clinical statement about reviewing reports. That's it? I said. You accused my son of using drugs, benched him, turned his teammates against him, and all you have to say is he can return to practice? Blackwell's voice went cold. Mrs. Garrett, I did what any responsible coach would do when faced with suspicious circumstances. The test is clean, so we move forward. But I'll be honest with you. One clean test doesn't erase my concerns. Athletes can cycle off substances before testing. They can use things that clear their system quickly. I'll be watching Elijah very carefully going forward. I felt my control snap. You'll be watching him because he's black and fast. And you can't accept that those two things can exist together naturally. You've been coaching for 19 years, and you've convinced yourself that black athletes who excel must be cheating. Blackwell's voice rose. Don't you dare make this about race. This is about program integrity and following proper procedures when something seems off. If you have a problem with how I run my team, you can take it up with the athletic director. But I'm not going to stand here and be accused of racism because I take my responsibilities seriously. He hung up before I could respond. I immediately called the school's athletic director, Kevin Thompson, and requested a meeting. He tried to schedule something for the following week, but I insisted on that afternoon. We met in his office at 4 o'clock. Thompson was in his mid-50s, white, with the careful, neutral expression of someone used to navigating parent complaints. I laid out everything. The accusation, the benching, the team poisoning, the clean test results, Blackwell's continued suspicion despite evidence. Thompson listened, taking occasional notes. When I finished, he set down his pen. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, Mrs. Garrett. Coach Blackwell did inform me about his concerns regarding Elijah's rapid improvement and his decision to request testing. That's actually proper protocol when a coach has legitimate questions about an athlete's performance. I leaned forward. Legitimate questions based on what? My son worked harder than everyone else and succeeded. That's not suspicious. That's athletics. Thompson shifted in his chair. I understand your frustration, but you have to see this from Coach Blackwell's perspective. When an athlete's performance improves dramatically in a short time frame, especially in a sport like track where records are so precisely measured, it raises flags. The coach has a responsibility to ensure fair competition. I pulled out my phone and showed him Elijah's training log. My son documents every workout, every morning run, every sprint session, every strength training day, every meal. He's been following a program designed by Coach Stevens from his previous school, who coached Olympic qualifiers. This isn't mysterious. It's dedication. Thompson glanced at the phone but didn't really look. I'm sure Elijah works hard, but Mrs. Garrett, you have to understand that Coach Blackwell has seen a lot in his career. He's developed an instinct for when something doesn't add up. That instinct has protected athletes from making serious mistakes. I felt my jaw tighten. Has it? Or has it targeted specific athletes while giving others the benefit of the doubt? Because I looked into Coach Blackwell's history. He left his previous school after discrimination complaints. What happened there? Thompson's expression hardened. I'm not going to discuss Coach Blackwell's employment history at other districts. Those matters were resolved appropriately. What I will tell you is that he's been an asset to our program here for 4 years. His teams win championships. His athletes earn scholarships. He runs a clean, competitive program. I stood up. My son passed the drug test. Coach Blackwell needs to apologize publicly to Elijah and the team. He needs to acknowledge that his accusations were wrong and that he damaged my son's reputation based on nothing but prejudice. Thompson stood as well. That's not going to happen, Mrs. Garrett. Coach Blackwell followed proper protocol. Requesting a drug test when performance raises questions is not an accusation of wrongdoing. It's due diligence. The test came back clean, which is exactly what everyone hoped for. Now Elijah can compete with no cloud hanging over him. That's a good outcome. I stared at him in disbelief. A good outcome? My son has teammates who think he's a cheater. He has a coach who openly stated he'll be watching him because one clean test doesn't erase suspicion. You're telling me that's acceptable? Thompson sat back down, signaling the meeting was ending. What I'm telling you is that Coach Blackwell acted appropriately within his authority as a coach. If you disagree with that assessment, you're welcome to file a formal complaint through the district's channels. But I'm not going to discipline a coach for doing his job. I left his office shaking with frustration and anger. The system was protecting itself, choosing to support a coach with a pattern of discrimination rather than acknowledge harm done to a student. That evening, I called Coach Stevens, Elijah's previous track coach before we moved districts. Stevens was a black man in his 50s who'd coached at the collegiate level before shifting to high school athletics. He'd mentored dozens of athletes to college scholarships and maintained relationships with many of them. I was wondering when you'd call, Stevens said when I explained the situation. Raymond Blackwell has a reputation. Not official, not documented, but coaches talk. He's known for being hardest on black athletes. Lots of discipline, lots of criticism, very little praise. And when a black kid on his team starts excelling, there's always some problem. Too confident, not a team player, suspicious improvement, attitude issues. I felt validated and horrified simultaneously. Why does he still have a job? Stevens laughed bitterly. Because he wins. His teams win conference championships. His athletes get scholarships. Parents love him because their white kids get attention and opportunity. The few black families who complain get dismissed as troublemakers or overprotective. The system protects winners, even when those winners are causing serious harm. I asked if he'd be willing to provide a statement about Blackwell's pattern. Stevens hesitated. That's complicated. I coach in a different district. Making formal accusations about a coach I've never worked with directly could damage my own credibility and position. But I'll tell you what I can do. I can reach out to families from Blackwell's previous schools, parents whose kids went through similar situations. If you're building a case, you need witnesses and documentation. One family's complaint gets dismissed. Multiple families with identical stories create a pattern that's harder to ignore. He paused. But Mrs. Garrett, you need to be prepared for this to get ugly. Districts hate these fights because they expose liability. They'll protect their employee and their reputation aggressively. You'll be painted as a difficult parent, someone with an agenda, maybe even someone trying to get money out of a lawsuit. Your son might face retaliation through benching or reduced playing time that's justified with vague coaching decisions. This is going to be hard on both of you. I told him I understood and appreciated any connections he could provide. Stevens promised to make some calls. 2 days later, he emailed me contact information for 3 families. The Washingtons, whose son had been on Blackwell's team 6 years ago, the Reeves family, whose daughter ran track under Blackwell 4 years ago, and the Bishops, whose son had quit the team 3 years ago. I called the Washingtons first. Nicole Washington answered and listened as I introduced myself and explained what was happening with Elijah. She was quiet for a long moment after I finished. Same thing happened to our son David. Exactly the same pattern. David was a sprinter, showed significant improvement his sophomore year after working with a private coach over the summer. Blackwell accused him of using PEDs, demanded testing, benched him for 2 meets while the test was pending. Test came back clean, but Blackwell kept finding reasons to keep David off the starting lineup. Said his form was off, his attitude wasn't right, he wasn't gelling with the team. David quit track his junior year because the constant scrutiny made it miserable. I asked if they'd filed a complaint. Nicole sighed. We tried. Met with the athletic director, who was someone different back then but had the same response. Coach's discretion, proper protocol, no evidence of discrimination. We eventually gave up because fighting was taking more energy than it was worth, and David wanted to move on. He focused on academics and got into college without track, but it hurt him. He loved running. Blackwell took that away. I asked if she'd be willing to document their experience in writing. Nicole said she'd talk to her husband but thought they would. If there's a chance to stop this from happening to another kid, we should take it. I called the Reeves family next. Patricia Reeves answered, and her story was eerily similar. Her daughter, Jasmine, had been accused of using performance enhancers after a growth spurt and corresponding improvement in her times. Clean drug test, continued suspicion, eventual transfer to a different school because the environment became toxic. The Bishop's experience was different but equally damaging. Their son Marcus had been a talented middle-distance runner who Blackwell constantly criticized for being too confident and not coachable. He was benched for disciplinary reasons multiple times, always for minor infractions that white teammates committed without consequence. Marcus eventually quit, and his parents pulled him from the school entirely, enrolling him in a private academy. Blackwell destroys black athletes systematically, Carl Bishop told me. He either accuses them of cheating, disciplines them excessively, or criticizes them until they quit. Then he congratulates himself for maintaining high standards and program integrity. We should have fought harder, but we were just trying to protect our son from more damage. By the end of the week, I had detailed written statements from all three families, documenting identical patterns of discrimination across 6 years and 2 different schools. Stevens also connected me with 2 coaches from other districts who'd heard similar stories about Blackwell through the coaching network, though they couldn't provide firsthand testimony. I compiled everything into a formal complaint. The initial accusation against Elijah, the clean drug test, Blackwell's continued suspicion, the pattern of identical accusations against black athletes at multiple schools, and statements from 3 families. I submitted it to the district's civil rights compliance officer, not just the athletic director who'd already dismissed my concerns. The compliance office confirmed receipt and said they'd begin an investigation within 10 business days. Meanwhile, Elijah returned to practice. Blackwell was coldly professional, giving instructions without encouragement or conversation. He moved Elijah from the starting lineup for the next meet despite his record times, saying he needed to rebuild trust in his performance consistency. Other black athletes on the team noticed the treatment. A senior named Jordan Wallace approached me after practice one day. Coach is doing the same thing to Elijah that he did to my brother 3 years ago. Isaiah was a jumper, started clearing heights nobody expected. Blackwell accused him of using illegal training methods, investigated his private coach, basically harassed him until Isaiah quit. My parents complained, but nothing happened. I asked if Jordan's family would add their statement to the investigation. Jordan said he'd ask, but wasn't sure they'd want to relive the experience. Isaiah's in college now doing well. Bringing this up might just make him angry about what he lost. I understood but emphasized that the pattern needed to be documented. Your brother's experience proves this isn't about Elijah specifically. It's about how Blackwell treats all black athletes who threaten his assumptions about who deserves to succeed. Jordan promised to talk to his family. That night, Elijah came home from practice frustrated. Coach barely looked at me today. He had Connor demonstrate proper starting stance even though Connor's start is weaker than mine. He gave detailed feedback to everyone except me. It's like I'm invisible unless he's watching for mistakes. I wanted to tell him the investigation would fix everything, but I'd learned enough to know systems move slowly, and sometimes never move at all. Instead, I told him to keep training, keep documenting, keep being excellent despite the hostility. The compliance investigation began 3 weeks after I filed the complaint. The investigator, a woman named Angela Torres, interviewed me first, taking detailed notes and asking clarifying questions about specific incidents. She interviewed Elijah, asking about his training regimen, his experience with Blackwell, his feelings about the accusation and benching. She interviewed the 3 families whose statements I'd provided. She also interviewed current team members, asking about team culture and coaching practices. I wasn't privy to what others said, but Jordan told me later that Angela asked very specific questions about whether Blackwell treated athletes differently based on race, whether discipline was applied equally, whether encouragement was distributed fairly. Several white parents complained to the school board about the investigation, claiming it was a witch hunt against a successful coach, that one disgruntled parent was trying to destroy a program. The local newspaper ran a story about the investigation that framed it as controversy over coaching decisions rather than systematic discrimination. Blackwell's attorney issued a statement defending his record and accusing me of trying to get him fired because my son wasn't getting enough playing time. Coach Blackwell has dedicated his career to developing young athletes of all backgrounds. These baseless accusations are an attempt to manipulate the system and undermine legitimate coaching decisions. Coach Blackwell followed proper protocol regarding drug testing and will be vindicated when the investigation concludes. The attorney's statement infuriated me because it twisted everything. This wasn't about playing time. This was about a coach who systematically targeted black athletes with accusations, suspicion, and hostility while giving white athletes benefit of the doubt and encouragement. The investigation dragged on for 6 weeks. During that time, Elijah continued training, but his time started slipping, not because he was less fit, but because the mental stress of competing under constant scrutiny while being excluded from the starting lineup was taking its toll. He'd show up to meets and watch inferior runners start while he sat on the bench, available only as an alternate if someone got injured. Other families started coming forward. A mother of a black long jumper from 2 years ago contacted Angela Torres after reading the newspaper story. Her daughter had been accused of using illegal techniques after improving her distance dramatically. Another family whose son had run cross-country under Blackwell described similar patterns of excessive discipline for minor infractions. The investigation expanded beyond Elijah's case into a comprehensive review of Blackwell's 13 years coaching in our state. In the middle of the investigation, something unexpected happened. Elijah competed in a regional qualifier meet where Blackwell couldn't bench him because the roster was determined by season performance rankings. Elijah ran the 100 meters in a time that would have qualified for the state championship, but there was a problem. Blackwell, who was timing manually as a backup to the electronic system, recorded Elijah's time as 0.2 of a second slower than the electronic timing showed. When officials checked the discrepancy, Blackwell claimed the electronic system must have malfunctioned because his stopwatch showed the slower time. The meet director reviewed the electronic footage and timing data. The system had functioned perfectly. Elijah's actual time was exactly what the electronic system recorded. Blackwell had either made an error with his manual timing or had deliberately recorded a slower time. The meet director noted the discrepancy in his report and used the electronic time as official, but the incident raised new questions. Had Blackwell been manipulating manual times throughout the season when electronic timing wasn't available? Were there other instances where he'd recorded slower times for Black athletes to prevent them from qualifying for championship meets? Angela Torres added these questions to her investigation. She requested all manual timing records from Blackwell for the past 3 seasons and compared them to electronic times when both were available. The analysis revealed a pattern. Blackwell's manual times for Black athletes were consistently slower than electronic times by small but significant margins. His manual times for white athletes were consistently accurate or occasionally faster. The statistical probability of this pattern occurring by chance was effectively 0. The district placed Blackwell on administrative leave pending the investigation's conclusion. They appointed an interim coach, a young assistant named Chris Norton, who'd been with the program for 2 years, but had minimal decision-making authority under Blackwell. Norton's first action as interim coach was reviewing the current roster and starting lineups. He put Elijah back in the starting lineup based purely on performance times. The difference was immediate and obvious. Elijah won his first race under Norton by a comfortable margin. His confidence started returning. Other Black athletes on the team began performing better too, freed from the constant weight of suspicion and excessive scrutiny. The team's overall performance actually improved with Blackwell gone, despite parents' fears that removing an experienced coach would hurt the program. Jordan Wallace, the senior whose brother had quit under Blackwell's coaching, ran a personal best in the 400 meters. 2 Black jumpers who'd been relegated to alternate positions under Blackwell suddenly placed first and second in the long jump at the conference championship. The investigation concluded 8 weeks after it began. Angela Torres' report was damning. She found substantial evidence of discriminatory treatment based on race, including disparate discipline, unequal encouragement, systematic exclusion of Black athletes from starting lineups despite superior performance, and statistical manipulation of timing records. She found that Blackwell had received multiple informal complaints over his career that were never properly investigated. She found that his pattern of targeting high-achieving Black athletes with accusations of cheating had occurred at every school where he'd coached. Her recommendation was immediate termination and referral to the state's licensing board for potential revocation of his coaching credentials. The school board held a closed session to review the report and determine next steps. The session lasted 4 hours. When they emerged, the board president read a prepared statement. After thorough review of the investigation into Coach Raymond Blackwell, the board has determined that serious violations of district policy occurred. Coach Blackwell's employment is terminated effective immediately. We apologize to the students and families who were harmed by discriminatory practices that should have been identified and addressed much earlier. Blackwell's attorney immediately announced plans to appeal the termination through the union grievance process, claiming the investigation was biased and that his client was being scapegoated for implementing high standards. The local newspaper ran a story about divided community reaction. White parents who'd supported Blackwell protested the firing, organizing a petition claiming the district had caved to political pressure. Black families who'd experienced his discrimination expressed relief and frustration that it had taken so long. The story gained regional attention when a sports columnist wrote a piece about systematic racism in high school athletics and how coaches like Blackwell thrive because their winning records shield them from accountability. Several other coaches across the state were suddenly facing scrutiny for similar patterns with their Black athletes. Elijah's story became part of a larger conversation about who gets believed, who gets second chances, and whose excellence gets questioned. The State Athletics Association announced a comprehensive review of coaching practices and implementation of mandatory bias training for all coaches. They created a formal reporting mechanism for athletes and families to document discriminatory treatment without fear of retaliation. These changes wouldn't have happened without multiple families speaking up and refusing to accept that discrimination was just coaching discretion. Blackwell's union grievance was denied after a hearing where 3 arbitrators reviewed the evidence. The statistical manipulation of timing records alone was sufficient grounds for termination under the union contract's conduct unbecoming clause. His coaching license was suspended pending a state board review. He couldn't coach high school athletics in our state anymore, though nothing prevented him from moving to another state and starting over. That reality bothered me. How many other coaches with similar patterns were currently employed, protected by winning records and administrative indifference? How many talented Black athletes were being driven out of sports by coaches who couldn't accept their success? Elijah finished the season with the second fastest time in the state for his age group. He qualified for the state championship meet and placed 3rd overall, earning attention from college scouts. Multiple Division I programs contacted him about potential scholarships. The success felt bittersweet. because we both knew he could have accomplished this months earlier if Blackwell hadn't derailed his season with false accusations and deliberate sabotage. Chris Norton was named permanent head coach after the season ended. His first action was meeting individually with every Black athlete on the team to apologize for not speaking up sooner about Blackwell's treatment. "I saw what was happening," Norton told me when we spoke. "I saw him time athletes differently, bench performers who deserved to start, discipline Black kids for things white kids got away with. I told myself it wasn't my place to question a senior coach, that maybe I was misinterpreting what I saw. I was a coward, and I'm sorry. I should have documented it and reported it. Your son and the others deserved better." I appreciated his honesty, even though it highlighted how many people had watched discrimination happen and chosen silence over risk. Norton implemented new team policies, transparent criteria for starting positions, documented disciplinary procedures applied equally, mandatory coaching staff training on implicit bias, and a team culture statement explicitly rejecting discrimination. The changes weren't revolutionary, but they represented a commitment to basic fairness that had been absent under Blackwell. Several other families whose children had been harmed by Blackwell filed civil lawsuits against the district for failing to address the pattern of discrimination despite multiple complaints. I didn't join those suits because I'd accomplished what mattered most to me. Blackwell was gone and couldn't hurt more athletes. The families who sued were seeking financial compensation and additional policy changes. Their cases were settled out of court with confidentiality agreements, so I never learned the specific terms. But the district implemented sweeping changes to its complaint investigation procedures, creating independent review processes for allegations of coaching discrimination. The newspaper reporter who'd written about divided community reaction contacted me for a follow-up story 6 months later. She wanted to know how Elijah was doing, and whether I felt the outcome was satisfactory. I told her Elijah was thriving under Norton's coaching, that his confidence had returned, that he was excited about his athletic future again. I also told her the outcome was incomplete. Blackwell will probably coach again somewhere else. He'll learn to hide his discrimination better, or he'll find a district that doesn't care because he wins championships. The system we have makes it too easy for coaches like him to survive, and too hard for families like mine to get justice. We got lucky because we had multiple families willing to speak up, and an investigator who took us seriously. Most families don't have that. She asked what I'd tell other parents facing similar situations. I thought carefully about my answer. Document everything. Every conversation. Every incident. Every concern. Save emails. Record meetings if your state allows it. Take detailed notes. Find other families with similar experiences because patterns are harder to dismiss than individual complaints. Be prepared for the system to protect itself first and your child second. And don't stop pushing just because the first person you talk to dismisses your concerns. Keep going up the chain until someone listens. The state championship meet was in mid-May. Elijah competed in the 100 meters and the 200 meters. He ran personal bests in both events, finishing second in the 100 and fourth in the 200. The performances confirmed what scouts had seen all season. He was a legitimate Division I talent with professional potential if he continued developing. After the 200, while Elijah was cooling down, a white parent from another school approached me. "You're Mrs. Garrett, right? The one who got Blackwell fired?" I tensed, unsure if this was going to be congratulations or confrontation. "I'm the one who filed the complaint that led to the investigation of his discriminatory practices, yes?" The parent nodded. "I wanted to thank you. My son runs for Westfield High. He's white, so he never experienced what your son did. But he watched Blackwell destroy Black teammates he respected, watched talented athletes quit because they couldn't handle the constant accusations and suspicion. It bothered him. He came home asking questions about racism and fairness that I didn't know how to answer. What you did taught him that people can fight injustice even when the system resists. That's an important lesson." The conversation reminded me that the impact of holding Blackwell accountable extended beyond just the Black athletes he'd harmed. White athletes had watched discrimination happen and internalized lessons about who deserves success and who deserves suspicion. Removing Blackwell and exposing his pattern disrupted those lessons, created space for a different understanding of fairness and excellence. College recruitment heated up during Elijah's junior year. He took official visits to 3 schools, all with competitive track programs and strong academic reputations. The recruiting process felt surreal after everything he'd been through. College coaches praised his times, his work ethic, his potential. Nobody questioned whether his success was legitimate. Nobody suggested he might be cheating. The difference between how college coaches treated him and how Blackwell had treated him was stark and painful. "This is what it should have been like all along," Elijah told me after one recruiting visit. "Coaches who see what I can do and want to help me get better, not coaches who look at me and see a problem to investigate." He committed to a university with a strong athletic tradition and offered a full scholarship covering tuition, room, board, and training expenses. The scholarship represented financial security, but also validation. Elijah's talent and dedication were being recognized and rewarded at the highest level of amateur athletics. Blackwell's accusations and sabotage hadn't been able to stop him, though they'd made the journey harder than it needed to be. Several younger Black athletes from the team told me they'd decided to stick with track because of how Elijah had handled everything. He showed us that we don't have to accept discrimination quietly, one sophomore told me. He fought back and won. That makes me think I can do the same if someone tries to hold me back. The ripple effects of our fight continued spreading. I joined the district's Equity Advisory Committee, working with other parents and educators to identify and address discriminatory practices across all sports and activities. We reviewed data on discipline, roster selection, leadership opportunities, and found patterns of racial disparity in multiple programs. The work was slow and often frustrating, but necessary. 2 years after the initial investigation, I received a message through Facebook from a mother in another state. Her son was a talented basketball player facing similar accusations of suspicious improvement from his coach. She'd read articles about Elijah's case and wanted advice. I spent an hour on the phone with her, sharing everything I'd learned about documentation, finding allies, escalating complaints, and refusing to accept dismissive responses from administrators. The system will try to wear you down, I told her. They'll suggest you're overreacting, that you're playing the race card, that you don't understand coaching. Don't let them convince you that your instincts about discrimination are wrong. Trust yourself. Fight for your son. Document everything and keep pushing until someone listens. She thanked me and said, knowing someone else had faced this and won gave her courage to keep fighting. A month later, she messaged that her son's coach had been suspended pending investigation after multiple families came forward with similar complaints. The pattern was undeniable once people started comparing experiences. Elijah graduated high school with honors and a track scholarship. At graduation, he was recognized as the school's Male Athlete of the Year, an award voted on by coaches and athletic staff. Chris Norton gave a speech about Elijah's resilience and character, about how he'd faced adversity and responded with grace and determination. He didn't mention Blackwell by name, but everyone understood what adversity he meant. After the ceremony, multiple Black families approached me with their own stories about coaching discrimination their children had faced in various sports. Some had fought back with mixed results. Others had stayed silent to avoid conflict. All of them expressed gratitude that someone had finally held a coach accountable in a public way that created lasting change. Their stories reinforced what I'd come to understand. Blackwell wasn't an isolated problem. He was one example of a widespread pattern of coaches who use their authority to discriminate while hiding behind rhetoric about standards and integrity. Fighting one coach didn't solve the systemic problem, but it created a precedent and a model for how families could push back effectively. The university Elijah attended had a strong track program with professional-level training facilities and coaching staff. His freshman year was challenging as he adjusted to college academics and the intensity of Division I athletics. But he thrived under coaches who believed in him and invested in his development without questioning whether his success was legitimate. He called me after his first collegiate meet, excited and slightly amazed. "Mom, I just ran against guys who will probably make the Olympics someday. And I held my own. I belonged there. This is what Coach Stevens always said was possible if I got real coaching and support." His voice carried joy that had been missing during his time under Blackwell. Hearing that joy felt like the truest victory. In his sophomore year, Elijah qualified for the National Collegiate Championship in the 100 meters. He didn't medal, but competing at that level was an achievement most high school athletes never reach. The experience motivated him to train harder, refine his technique, and commit to the process of incremental improvement. His coaches praised his work ethic and mental toughness, qualities he'd developed partly through surviving Blackwell's discrimination. I thought about Raymond Blackwell sometimes, wondered where he'd ended up and whether he'd learned anything from being held accountable. I searched his name online occasionally but found little information. He'd disappeared from coaching, at least in our state. Part of me hoped he'd gained some insight about his biases and the harm he'd caused. The more realistic part knew people like him rarely change their fundamental beliefs. They just get better at hiding their discrimination or find environments where it's tolerated. The important thing was that he couldn't hurt athletes in our district anymore. That had to be enough. 3 years after Blackwell's termination, the State Athletics Association published a report on racial disparities in high school sports. The data showed that Black athletes faced disciplinary action at higher rates, received less playing time relative to performance, and were more likely to be accused of rule violations than their white peers. The report cited Elijah's case as an example of how discriminatory coaching practices can derail talented athletes and recommended comprehensive reforms including bias training, transparent selection criteria, and independent review processes for discrimination complaints. Elijah graduated from college with a degree in kinesiology and a decision to pursue professional track. He didn't make the Olympic team his first attempt, but he made the finals at the trials, running against the fastest athletes in the country and proving he belonged among the elite. Whether he eventually makes an Olympic team remains to be seen, but he's already succeeded beyond what most athletes achieve. More importantly, he succeeded despite a coach who tried to destroy his confidence and derail his career before it started. Several young Black athletes from our town have reached out to Elijah for mentoring and advice. He makes time to talk with them, shares his experiences, and encourages them to trust their abilities even when coaches or others question them. He tells them what Coach Stevens told him and what I reinforced. Excellence is the best response to discrimination, but you also have to be willing to fight the system when it tries to hold you back unjustly. Both things can be true simultaneously. I remain active in advocacy work around equity in athletics. I speak at school board meetings, serve on district committees, and connect families facing discrimination with resources and support. The work is ongoing because the problem is ongoing. New coaches make the same mistakes old coaches made. New families face the same accusations and dismissals we faced. But each successful challenge to discrimination makes the next challenge slightly easier. Each coach held accountable makes other coaches more careful about their biases. Each policy change creates slightly more protection for students. Progress is slow and incomplete, but it's real. Looking back, I'm proud of how Elijah and I fought against Blackwell's discrimination. We could have accepted the benching, taken the clean drug test as sufficient vindication, and moved on quietly. Instead, we documented the pattern, found allies, escalated our complaints, and refused to stop until meaningful accountability occurred. That choice was hard and risky, but it protected other athletes and created changes that outlasted our personal situation. Sometimes the right choice is also the hardest choice, and you only know if it was worth it years later when you see the ripples spreading outward from that moment of courage. Elijah called me last month from a training session in California, where he's working with an elite coaching group preparing for next year's Olympic trials. His times have improved significantly under their guidance. He's healthy, confident, and excited about his future in the sport he loves. Remember when Coach Blackwell said I'd never make it because I was just a kid who'd gotten lucky with one good season? Elijah asked. I think about that sometimes when I'm training with people who've medaled at world championships. He was so certain I didn't belong at this level. He was so sure my success couldn't be real. And he was completely wrong about everything. We talked for a while about his training and his goals. Before hanging up, Elijah said something that stayed with me. Mom, thank you for not letting him break me. There were days I wanted to quit, wanted to walk away from track entirely because the constant accusations made it stop being fun. You kept fighting even when I was too tired to fight for myself. You taught me that I was worth fighting for. His words made me tear up because I knew how close we'd come to a different outcome, one where Blackwell's discrimination succeeded in driving a talented athlete away from his passion. Elijah's success wasn't guaranteed by his talent alone. It required resilience, support, and a refusal to accept injustice as inevitable. Those lessons extend beyond athletics into every area of life where people face discrimination and systems resist accountability. The story that started with an angry coach's false accusation became a story about fighting back, building coalitions, demanding justice, and refusing to let others define what you're capable of achieving. That's the story I want other families to know is possible, even when the fight feels impossible. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.